You know how people always say that hindsight is 2020? Well, they're right. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. They were everywhere, like neon lights flashing in my face that I somehow managed to ignore. My husband Ryan working late nights more often. My sister Cassidy suddenly being interested in my marriage, asking questions about our relationship that she'd never cared about before. The way they'd both check their phones at family dinners, sometimes smiling at the exact same moment. But I was busy with my own career, building my reputation in the linguistics department at Eastern Bay University. I'd spent 10 years there, working my way up from adjunct professor to tenured faculty. I was respected. My research on cross-cultural communication patterns was finally getting recognition, and I thought, God, I was so naive. I thought I had a supportive husband who understood the demands of academic life. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March when everything fell apart. Classes had been canceled due to an unexpected snowstorm, and I decided to head home early. Our house was a charming colonial in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where we'd planned to eventually raise children. We'd been trying for 2 years with no success, and the fertility treatments were taking their toll on me both physically and emotionally. I remember pulling into the driveway and noticing Cassidy's blue Honda parked on the street. I thought she might have stopped by to check on me. She knew about our last failed IVF attempt and had been surprisingly supportive. That should have been my first real clue, honestly. Cassidy had never been the nurturing type. The house was quiet when I entered. Too quiet. I called out, but no one answered. I remember standing in our entryway, snow melting off my boots, creating little puddles on the hardwood floor we'd refinished together last summer. Something felt wrong. I could feel it in my stomach. That twisting, sinking feeling when your body knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. As I climbed the stairs, I heard it. A muffled laugh. My sister's laugh, coming from our bedroom. Maybe they're planning a surprise, I remember thinking, desperately grasping at any explanation that wasn't the obvious one. But deep down, I already knew. I pushed open the bedroom door, and there they were, Ryan and Cassidy, in our bed. Our bed. The one Ryan and I had saved for months to buy when we first got married. The one where I'd cried in his arms after each negative pregnancy test. They didn't notice me at first. They were too wrapped up in each other, literally and figuratively. Well, this is interesting, I said, my voice sounding strangely calm even to my own ears. They sprang apart like they'd been electrocuted. Ryan's face went white. Cassidy pulled the sheet up to her chin. My sheets, my expensive Egyptian cotton sheets that I'd splurged on for our anniversary. Val, Ryan started, but I held up my hand. How long? I asked. They looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that people have when they've been intimate with each other for a while. That in itself was like a second betrayal. It just happened, Cassidy said, her voice small. I laughed then, a harsh sound that didn't sound like me at all. No, it didn't. How long? Ryan sat up, running his hands through his hair, a gesture I used to find endearing. Val, we should talk about this when we're calmer. How long? I was surprised by how steady my voice was. 2 years, he finally admitted. It started after your first round of IVF failed. 2 years. While I was pumping my body full of hormones, riding the emotional roller coaster of hope and despair, my husband and my sister had been having an affair. 2 years of family dinners, holiday celebrations, my birthday parties, all while they were laughing behind my back. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I simply nodded, turned around, and walked out. I heard them calling after me, but I kept walking. Out to my car. I drove to a hotel and checked in, and then, sitting on that generic hotel bed, staring at the ugly abstract painting on the wall, I allowed myself to fall apart. Just for one night, because the next morning I had a plan. Or at least the beginning of one. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just break your heart, it rewires your brain. Suddenly, memories you cherished take on new meanings. Like the weekend Ryan couldn't join me at my parents' anniversary celebration because he was swamped with work at his accounting firm. Meanwhile, Cassidy had canceled too, claiming she had a stomach bug. I had brought them both soup afterward, worried about how hard they were both working. I spent a week at that hotel not answering their calls or texts. Ryan's messages started panicked, then shifted to apologetic, then veered into defensive territory. It wasn't planned. We never meant to hurt you. You were so focused on having a baby. We got carried away. Cassidy's messages were worse. I'm so sorry, Val. You're my sister and I love you. It was a terrible mistake. Ryan and I both know that now. As if their remorse somehow erased the betrayal. As if saying sorry made it okay that they'd been sleeping together in my bed while I was at fertility appointments, trying to create a family with a man who was sleeping with my sister. Eventually, I went back home. Ryan had moved to the guest room, a gesture of respect that was almost laughable in its inadequacy. We had the conversation you'd expect. Tears, his. Cold rationality, mine. Promises to go to counseling, to rebuild. I nodded along, letting him believe I was considering it. I need time, I told him. I need space to think. He agreed eagerly, relieved that I wasn't throwing him out immediately. What he didn't know was that I'd already made my decision. I just needed to put certain pieces in place first. 2 weeks after D-Day, Discovery Day, as I bleakly referred to it in my mind, I received an email that I'd been hoping for but had almost forgotten about. 6 months earlier, I'd applied for a prestigious visiting professor position at Cambridge University in England. It was a long shot, highly competitive, 3-year minimum commitment, but a career maker for someone in my field. I'd mentioned it to Ryan when I applied, but we both knew it would mean major life changes if it happened. At the time, I wasn't even sure I'd accept it if offered because of our fertility treatments and our life here. Ryan had seemed supportive but not concerned, probably because he thought the chances were slim. But now, staring at the acceptance email, I felt something I hadn't felt since walking into our bedroom that day. Hope. A way out. A new beginning. I didn't tell Ryan immediately. Instead, I made an appointment with my lawyer friend Meredith. Over coffee at a cafe far from campus where no one would recognize us, I laid out the situation. I need to protect myself, I told her. Financially and otherwise. Meredith was clinical and efficient. Pennsylvania is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets will be divided fairly, but not necessarily equally. Given the circumstances of infidelity, you'd likely get a favorable settlement. I nodded, taking notes. And if we were to sell our assets first, liquidate everything before I file? She raised an eyebrow. Thinking of a fresh start? Something like that. She slid a business card across the table. Talk to Diana. She's a financial advisor who specializes in divorce planning. She'll help you get your ducks in a row. Over the next month, I gathered information methodically. Our house had appreciated significantly since we bought it 7 years ago. Ryan's 401k had grown steadily. We had joint savings, investment accounts, valuable art pieces we'd collected during our travels. I documented everything. Meanwhile, I played the role of the wounded wife trying to heal. I agreed to 3 counseling sessions, where I sat quietly while Ryan poured his heart out about his mistake and how desperate he was to fix our marriage. I nodded at appropriate intervals, even shed tears once or twice. The therapist thought we were making progress. At home, I maintained a careful distance, not hostile, just hurt and processing. Too hurt to be intimate, but civil enough that Ryan started to believe we might actually move forward. Cassidy was a different story. I refused to see her or speak to her, which Ryan reluctantly accepted as reasonable. What he didn't know was that I'd hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her. I had a hunch, and I needed confirmation. It took only 2 weeks for the PI to deliver. Cassidy wasn't just seeing Ryan. She had another man too, a married colleague from her office. The affair had been going on concurrently with her relationship with Ryan. The photos showed them entering a motel together, looking very familiar with the routine. I smiled when I saw those photos, not because I was happy, but because they confirmed what I'd suspected all along. My sister wasn't in love with my husband. She just enjoyed taking what belonged to other people. That night, I finally told Ryan about the Cambridge offer. I think we should consider it, I said casually over dinner. A fresh start might be exactly what we need. He looked up, surprised. You mean both of us? Moving to England? I nodded, taking a sip of wine. 3 years minimum. New environment, away from complications. It could be good for us. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He'd have to leave his job at the accounting firm, sell the house, leave his friends. And though he wouldn't say it aloud, figure out how to end things with Cassidy without raising my suspicions. But he was desperate to save our marriage, or at least to avoid the financial hit of a divorce and the social embarrassment of being exposed as an adulterer who slept with his wife's sister. "Let me think about it," he said. But I could already see he was considering it seriously. The seed was planted. The next morning, he told me he thought it was a brilliant idea. A fresh start. Just what we needed. I smiled and squeezed his hand. "I'm so glad you agree." Once Ryan agreed to the move, things started happening quickly. I accepted the Cambridge position, which came with a substantial salary increase and housing allowance. The university wanted me there by late August for the fall term, which gave us about 3 months to liquidate our life in Pennsylvania. "We should sell the house," I suggested. "Property values are at an all-time high in our neighborhood." Ryan agreed readily. Our real estate agent was thrilled. She'd been trying to get listings in our area for months. She promised a quick sale at well above asking price. "What about your job?" I asked Ryan one evening, careful to keep my tone casual. "Will you try to arrange something remote or look for new opportunities in Cambridge?" He ran his hand through his hair. That nervous gesture I once found endearing. "I've been thinking about that. My firm doesn't have international connections, but this might be a good time for a change anyway. I could cash out my partnership stake." I nodded sympathetically. "That makes sense. A clean break." And just like that, Ryan began dismantling his financial ties here, exactly as I'd hoped. He negotiated a buyout with his partners, converting his equity in the accounting firm to cash. It was a substantial sum. He'd been with them for 12 years and had built significant value. Meanwhile, I was busy with my own preparations. Following Diana's advice, I opened new individual accounts at banks that had no connection to our current financial institutions. I researched international banking regulations and tax implications for Americans living abroad. Our house sold within a week for $75,000 above asking price. The buyers wanted a quick closing, which suited my timeline perfectly. We began packing, sorting through a decade of accumulated possessions. "Do we really need to bring all this stuff?" I asked, gesturing at our furniture. "The Cambridge housing will be furnished, and shipping everything would cost a fortune." Ryan agreed that selling most of our belongings made sense. "We can put the money towards setting up our new life," he said. Each weekend became a purge. Estate sales, online listings, donations. Our beautiful colonial gradually emptied, along with the life we'd built. I felt oddly detached watching it all go. The dining table where we'd hosted so many dinner parties. The sectional couch where we'd spent lazy Sunday mornings. The bookshelves Ryan had built for my academic collection. None of it seemed to matter anymore. As our closing date approached, we moved into a short-term rental, a furnished apartment that felt appropriately transitional. Our house proceeds went into our joint account, along with Ryan's partnership buyout. The numbers were substantial, representing years of hard work and investment. Throughout this process, I maintained my cool, rational demeanor. Not too enthusiastic, not too withdrawn. Just a woman working through marital difficulties while preparing for a significant career opportunity. Ryan seemed relieved by my practicality. He probably thought the physical distance from Cassidy was helping me heal. In reality, I was simply executing my plan with methodical precision. About 6 weeks before our planned departure, I casually mentioned to Ryan that we should update our legal documents. "We'll be living in a foreign country," I pointed out. "We should make sure everything's in order. Wills, powers of attorney, that sort of thing." He agreed without hesitation. I recommended using my university's legal services, free for faculty and much simpler than hiring our own lawyer. "They handle international relocations all the time," I explained. "They'll know exactly what we need." In reality, I'd already consulted with Diana, who had connected me with a specialized attorney. Together, we prepared a set of documents that looked standard but contained carefully worded clauses that would give me sole control over our assets. The powers of attorney were particularly important. They included provisions that would allow me to act independently regarding our finances once we were abroad. When the time came to sign, I arranged for the university notary to come to our apartment. I presented Ryan with a stack of documents, explaining each one briefly as I'd been coached to do. This one's for banking. It allows either of us to manage accounts while we're settling in, I said, pointing to where he should sign. This one's for the property management of any investments we decide to keep here. Ryan signed without reading the fine print. He trusted me. The irony wasn't lost on me. As each document received its notary stamp, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. This wasn't who I'd ever imagined becoming, yet here I was, orchestrating an elaborate financial escape plan. Meanwhile, Cassidy had been trying to reach me. Multiple texts, calls, even a handwritten letter apologizing and begging to talk. I maintained my silence, which clearly unnerved her. She even showed up at my office on campus once, but I'd already advised security not to let her in. What she didn't know was that I had arranged to accidentally run into her married lover's wife at a coffee shop. A casual conversation, a few strategic comments about my own marital troubles, and a carefully timed mention of seeing her husband with some woman at the Marriott on Thursdays. I didn't specifically name Cassidy. I didn't need to. I simply planted the seed of suspicion and let it grow. 2 weeks before our scheduled flight to England, all the pieces were in place. Our house was sold. Our possessions were liquidated. Our assets were consolidated and documented. The legal paperwork was complete, and Ryan had no idea what was coming. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. My private investigator delivered one final set of photos. Cassidy, looking distraught, fighting with her married lover outside his house while his wife watched from the doorway. The affair had blown up spectacularly, exactly as I'd calculated it would. That night, I told Ryan I needed to fly to Cambridge early to arrange our housing and set up my office. He was disappointed but understanding. "I'll finish things up here and meet you there in 2 weeks as planned," he said, kissing my forehead. I smiled and told him I'd miss him. It was the last lie I needed to tell. The morning of my departure felt surreal. Ryan drove me to the airport, helping with my luggage and going on about how proud he was of me, how exciting this new chapter would be for us. I let him talk, nodding and smiling at appropriate intervals while mentally checking my exit strategy for any loose ends. At the security checkpoint, he hugged me tightly. "I love you, Val. I know I screwed up badly, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I looked into his eyes, those familiar blue eyes that I once thought held only truth, and said, "I know you will." He seemed encouraged by that response, mistaking it for forgiveness. With one last kiss, he watched me walk through security, waving until I was out of sight. As soon as I turned the corner, I pulled out my phone and sent a pre-drafted email to a very specific list of recipients. The email contained selected photos of Ryan and Cassidy together, along with a dignified explanation of why I was leaving the country and my marriage. I sent it to our closest friends, Ryan's parents, who had always treated me like a daughter, his 2 brothers, and, most importantly, his business partners. I didn't send it to my parents or other family. I'd already spoken to them privately. I didn't do this for revenge. I did it because I refused to let Ryan control the narrative. I refused to be painted as the cold academic wife who abandoned her husband for a career opportunity. The truth needed to be known, and I needed to be the one to tell it. My next action was to call the bank. Using the power of attorney Ryan had so obligingly signed, I transferred the entirety of our joint accounts, house proceeds, his partnership buyout, our savings, to my new individual accounts. I left exactly $10,000 in the joint account, which seemed appropriately symbolic. $1,000 for each year of marriage. Then I turned off my phone and boarded my flight to London. I didn't turn my phone back on until I was settled in my university-provided flat in Cambridge the next day. When I did, the deluge began. Texts and voicemails from Ryan, evolving from confusion to panic to rage. "Val, some of our friends got a weird email from you. Call me. The bank says there's a problem with our accounts. Are you handling this from England? What the hell, Valerie? Where is our money? You can't do this. It's illegal. I'm calling a lawyer. There were also messages from friends, expressing support and shock. Ryan's mother left a tearful voicemail saying she was heartbroken, but understood why I had to leave. His partners sent a terse email stating that in light of recent information, they were reviewing the terms of his buyout for potential ethical breaches. I let Ryan stew for 24 hours before I finally called him. It was 3 a.m. his time when my call woke him up. "Where the hell is our money?" he demanded immediately, his voice rough with sleep and anger. "Our money is exactly where it should be," I replied calmly. "Safe from someone who betrayed every vow he ever made to me. You can't just—" "Actually, I can. Check the documents you signed, Ryan, particularly clauses 16 through 24 of the power of attorney. They give me full authority to protect our marital assets in case of proven infidelity." There was silence, then the sound of papers shuffling. I could picture him frantically scanning the documents he'd never bothered to read. "This won't hold up," he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "No judge will— Perhaps not. But how long do you want to fight this? How much more do you want to spend on legal fees? How much more public humiliation can you handle?" I paused to let that sink in. "And remember, I have documentation of your 2-year affair with my sister. I have evidence of your emotional cruelty during my fertility treatments. I have character witnesses in abundance." More silence. I could almost hear him calculating his options and coming up short. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice smaller now. "You could have just divorced me. Why all this?" I laughed, a sound without humor. "Because you and Cassidy didn't just have an affair, Ryan. You stole years of my life. Years I spent believing in a future that was never going to happen. Years of painful treatments and hope and disappointment. You watched me suffer and used it as an excuse to sleep with my sister. So yes, I took our money. Consider it payment for services rendered. I'll find you," he threatened weakly. "I'll come to Cambridge and what? Create an international incident? Harass a faculty member at one of the world's most prestigious universities? I don't think so." I kept my voice even. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to accept that our marriage is over. You're going to sign the divorce papers my lawyer will send next week, and you're going to move on with your life, whatever's left of it." "I have nothing left," he shouted. "You took everything?" "Not everything," I corrected him. "I left you $10,000. And you still have Cassidy, right? Your soulmate? The woman worth destroying your marriage for?" I paused. "Oh wait, I forgot to tell you. You might want to check in with her. Last I heard, she was having some relationship troubles of her own." I could hear his breathing change as the implication sank in. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I didn't do anything. Cassidy managed that all on her own. Ask her about Thomas Greenfield. Ask her how long she's been sleeping with him. Ask her why his wife was throwing her clothes on the front lawn last week." I heard a choked sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. "Goodbye, Ryan," I said quietly. "I truly hope you and Cassidy find happiness together. You're certainly welcome to each other." I hung up and blocked his number. Later that day, I received a single text from an unknown number, presumably Ryan using someone else's phone. It contained just 4 words. She was cheating too. I smiled at my phone, feeling a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. It was done. The plan had worked perfectly. That evening, I walked through Cambridge's historic streets, past buildings that had stood for centuries. Students hurried by, engrossed in conversations about philosophy and literature and science. A light rain began to fall, but I didn't mind. For the first time in months, I felt clean, washed new. I had my career, I had financial security, I had a future entirely of my own making. And Ryan and Cassidy? They had exactly what they deserved, each other. At least until they inevitably betrayed one another too. That was 18 months ago. Life at Cambridge has exceeded my expectations in every way. My research on cross-cultural communication patterns has garnered international attention, and I've been invited to speak at conferences across Europe. My department chair has already hinted that they'll be offering me a permanent position when my visiting professorship concludes. The divorce was finalized 6 months after I left. Ryan did try to contest the financial arrangements, but his lawyer eventually convinced him that the combination of the signed documents and the public relations nightmare of fighting his ex-wife over money after cheating with her sister made it a losing battle. He signed the papers and disappeared from my life. I've heard bits and pieces about him through mutual friends who still keep in touch. After I left, he moved in with Cassidy, a decision born more of financial necessity than love, I suspect. That arrangement lasted all of 3 months before imploding spectacularly. Apparently, trust is difficult to build on a foundation of mutual betrayal. Who would have thought? Ryan eventually found a job at a much smaller accounting firm, taking a substantial pay cut. Cassidy, from what I understand, was fired from her position after the scandal with her married colleague became public knowledge. Last I heard, she'd moved to Arizona to start fresh. Neither of them contact me anymore, which is for the best. As for me, I've built a new life here. Cambridge suits me. The academic atmosphere, the history, the sense of being part of something enduring. I've made friends among the faculty and even started dating recently. A literature professor named Oliver who specializes in American poetry and makes me laugh in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Oliver knows my story. I told him everything on our 3rd date, wanting complete honesty from the start. He listened without judgment, then said something I'll never forget. What happened to you was terrible. What you did in response was creative justice. I admire both your resilience and your strategic thinking. We've been together 6 months now. It's still new, still developing, but it feels honest in a way my marriage to Ryan never did, even in the beginning. Oliver and I are transparent with each other. We're both wary of commitment after past betrayals, but we're also both willing to try. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty about how I handled things with Ryan. Taking nearly all our money, publicly exposing the affair, orchestrating the collapse of his professional reputation. These aren't actions that the old Valerie would have considered. The woman I was before walking into that bedroom would have been horrified by what I eventually did. But that woman died that day. The person who emerged from those ashes had to protect herself, because no one else would. I don't regret it. Not the planning, not the deception, not the calculated coldness of my revenge. What I do sometimes regret is the loss of the person I might have been if this betrayal hadn't happened. There's a softness that's gone from me now, a willingness to be vulnerable that I'm not sure will ever fully return. Oliver understands this. He has his own armor, his own scars. Last week I received an email from Ryan, the first direct communication in over a year. I almost deleted it unread, but curiosity won out. It was surprisingly brief. Val, I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that I understand now what I did to you. Not just the affair, but the years of betrayal while you were going through treatments. It was unforgivable. You deserved better. I hope you found happiness. I've had to rebuild from nothing, and while I hate that it happened this way, it's forced me to become a better person. That's all. R. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. His growth or redemption isn't my concern anymore. My life is here now, moving forward in directions I never anticipated, but have come to value deeply. Yesterday, I submitted the final draft of my book, an academic text on communication breakdowns in intimate relationships. It's not about Ryan and me, not explicitly, but the research was certainly informed by personal experience. Cambridge University Press has already expressed interest in publishing it next year. Sometimes when I'm walking home from my office in the evening, watching the sunset paint the ancient college buildings in gold and pink, I feel an almost overwhelming sense of gratitude. Not for what happened. I would never be grateful for betrayal, but for my own capacity to overcome it, for the strength I didn't know I possessed until it was tested so severely. I built a new life from the ashes of betrayal. I found power in my darkest moment, and while I would never have chosen this path, I walk it now with my head held high, belonging entirely to myself. That, I think, is the truest